Good morning, y'all. Very heavy room over here on this side. Y'all are holding it up on that side. That's where the sunshine is, though. So if you want to move towards it, you can. So glad that y'all are here. We're going to get started with a song to just kind of help us settle in. Archer, you're keeping a good beat, man. That was good. That was like right on beat. There's a drummer. There's a drummer in you. I know it. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along, put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Well, if you're willing and able, would y'all stand and sing this with us? No, I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all. You still call me friend, 'cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. And there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. The only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Sing that one more time. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Amen. Y'all can have a seat.
Well, good morning. My name's Jeremy. I'm the pastor here of the Grove Cottage Grove, and it is so good to be with you. I say that every single week. I mean it every single week. I especially mean it this week. Last Sunday, my kids came home and they asked me a question about this thing that we used to do here as a part of the Grove, Cottage Grove. Every week we'd make announcements about COVID protocols. And one of the things that we trained our people to do is anytime you heard the word COVID, you'd boo. And they asked, why don't we do the COVID boo thing anymore? And I said, well, because we just don't need to talk about COVID quite as much anymore. Well, all three of my kids came down with COVID this past week. Guess who else came down with COVID? Katie, our worship arts director, and daughter, Lucy. However, I have remained healthy and negative. My wife has remained healthy and negative. Jacob has remained healthy and negative. But it just seems like it's going around. And it has meant that I have not left the house barely for the last week. And I am especially glad to be with you this morning out of the house. Woohoo! We're a brand new church that exists to grow goodness. And so we hope that every interaction that you have with us, whether it's a COVID week or not, whether you're in the room with Jacob Stone, whether you're in the room with us or you're watching with us online from your home or from sunny Florida or from wherever, that you are somehow experiencing nurturing, healing, and wholeness in your life.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I'd like to bring everybody's attention to the pamphlet. You probably received it when you walked in the door. If you open it up, you'll see a couple different things. One of them is a sheet here that if you could fill that out and put it in the basket in the back, it just gives us some information if you're new to the church. Also, some things that you might be interested in. I think there's a little spot to say, if you pray for a person, and we've got our little prayer board over there. But then also there are ways to give to the church. So we've got our online, our Venmo, and if you're watching online, don't do the Venmo app at the or there's a link in the website. It's been a long week. Don't do the link on the website if you're watching, just because it's going to boot you out. But there's Venmo, and you can always put the donation in the basket when you put this little fellow in there as well.
On the backhand side of your handout, we have the 3 most important things for you to know this coming month. This is a new month, so it means that there are 3 new things, so don't be sleeping back there thinking you know all these things. First of all, the one thing that is coming up this week that is not on the back that we need to direct your attention to is the Pajama Ball. Pajama Ball is happening this Friday. If you don't know about the Pajama Ball, you need to know about it. It's a big fun event that we are putting on Friday night. We will give more information right as we are coming out of the service. It will be the last thing you hear about before we dismiss you, so I'm not going to spend too much attention about that, but I do want you to have that in mind as this week goes on. But the 3 things that are on the back, first of all, is Polarized. This is our Lent series. So Lent is this season of preparation leading up to Easter. It begins with Ash Wednesday, which is later this month, and then leads up to all the way up to Easter and includes Good Friday and all of the stuff, all of the Sundays in between. And so a couple things to know about that. Number one, we will have a Good Friday service too. We will have a Ash Wednesday service. The Ash Wednesday service, however, will be at our Woodbury location, but it will be led in music by Katie and Jacob. So we're going to leverage the idea of us being a church with multiple locations. It's going to be up there in Woodbury, and it's going to be led by our music folks. So that's number one. Number 2 is the series that's going to kick off that following Sunday and go throughout the season of Lent. We're calling it Polarized, what pushes us apart and can bring us together. I don't know if you know this, but our country's really polarized right now.
Weird.
Yeah, I know, right? It's shocking. I'm here to shock you this morning. And we can be polarized about a great number of things. And so this series is going to be talking about what it means to be polarized. What are the areas where it's actually good to be polarized, maybe, and how we can talk across the divide with people that we don't agree with. So that is what we're going to be looking forward to for the whole season of Lent. Then we also, of course, will have a Good Friday service. We're still finalizing plans on that. But all of the information about all of the stuff that's going on during Lent can be found on that link. Number 2 is get involved. One of the best ways to get connected into the life of the church and to build relationships with other people is actually to volunteer. And it's also one of the ways where we get to help to welcome the people who are arriving next. One of the great things that is happening right now is more and more people are getting connected with this church. And in order to continue to be able to welcome them, we need to have people in volunteer roles in order to welcome them. So if you are not yet in a volunteer role but would love to be in one, we would love for you to be in one. We have a list of all of the different things that we have kind of laid out. Here are different ways for you to get involved. You can find that on the link here. If you have no idea about the things that you might be interested in getting involved with, but you know you want to get involved, you can also indicate on the back of your insert, get involved, and we can follow up with you and have conversation about all of the things that are available and maybe ones that aren't yet available that we might be able to create in order for you to contribute. The last thing is baptism. Baptism is one of the sacraments of the church. A sacrament is an outward sign of an inward grace. It's a symbol of the work that God is doing in and through us. Last month, we had our very first baptism up here, baby Ivy, and we had lots of questions afterwards and a lot of excitement from people around the idea of either getting their kids baptized or themselves getting baptized as adults. In the United Methodist Church, you can be baptized at any age. And so what we're planning, we are trying to put together a big baptism event near Easter. We don't have all of the details around that yet, but we know that there's a lot of excitement from folks around it, and we'd love to be able to build up that excitement around an event on a Sunday morning even. If you're interested in either learning more about baptism or signing your kids up to be baptized or yourself being baptized, you can find that information again by following this link. Okay, I think I got it all.
Sweet. Well, with baptism of kids are super important here at the Grove. You can kind of hear them around a little bit. We've got a lot of things to keep them busy. We've got our little busy area over there for coloring, soft blocks. In the pews, you'll notice coloring, and kids are all ages, 9 to 99. And there's also going to be godly play on just a little bit. With godly play, you'll notice if your kid is new to here, if you could fill out, there's a little form right in front of should be right in front of you. Fill that out so this way we know who the kiddo is. That'd be wonderful. And then there's also a little a nursery. Is that staff today?
It's staff today?
It is staff today. And so you can, if it's a little under the age of 4, you can bring them in there, and there'll be somebody in there to watch them for you.
With that, we get to move into the introvert's least favorite part of the service, the connection point. Building meaningful relationships as a new church is really important, even and especially over just like small, meaningless conversation. And so we force you to do that because it's so important. So in just a moment, we're going to have you stand up, find somebody next to you that you don't know or don't know very well, and to kind of lower the bar a little bit, we give you a question as a prompt for you to be able to be in that conversation. So today's question is, what's your go-to cold weather comfort food? It's much warmer today. It's supposed to be a much warmer week, but this last week was miserable. Maybe you had this comfort food in the last week to comfort yourself in like the fact that you have to live in a climate like this. What is something that helps you to get through on those cold weather days? Take a moment, stand up, find somebody next to you don't know or don't know very well, and discuss that question, and we'll reconvene in just a couple minutes.
All right, just 30 more seconds, and then we'll sing the kids out to the Grove kids. All right, well, we love to sing the kids out to Grove kids, so we'll do that. Jesus, I'll find the key. Little children, all the children of the world. We'll do it a cappella. How about that? Hey, every color, shape, and type, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Yay. Katie's not here, so you can blame all the mistakes on me. I'll take it. Thank you, Grant. You're great, Grant. It's a small room, so everyone heard you. It's fine. No, I love it. Well, would y'all stand and sing this hymn with us?
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune thy heart to sing thy grace. Teach me songs are never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love.
I was lost in utter darkness till you came and rescued me. I was bound by all my sin when your love came and set me free. Now my soul can sing a new song. Now my heart has found a home. Now your grace is always with me, and I'll never be alone.
Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy grace, Lord, like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wonder what I feel in, prone to leave the that I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it for thy courts above.
Amen. Y'all can have a seat.
Well, if you have been around at all over the past month, we have been in the middle of this series that we call Beautiful Mess, and we have been looking at the book of Hebrews and all of these messy stories of faith, and how rather than trying to polish up our stories and polish up our lives, instead saying, what if the cracks in our lives and in our faiths can actually be highlights? And as a part of this series as well, each week we have had someone from our congregation come up and share their own messy story of faith. This has been one of my favorite things that we have done as a church in our first year of existence, to be honest. And so this week we get to hear from Alexa Rutherford. So welcome Alexa up here.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Alexa, and if you haven't gotten the chance to meet me yet, or if I haven't gotten the chance to talk to you, you've probably seen me running around chasing my daughter Ivy, or you might have seen my husband Cole back there doing the same. Honestly, this is really crazy right now. If you would have told me a year ago that I would not only be going to church every Sunday or almost every Sunday, but that I would be up here sharing my story, I honestly don't think I would have believed you, because I really don't have any kind of religious background. Growing up, my mom was not religious, and my dad was raised Catholic. Oh, there's Ivy. And my dad was raised Catholic, but he is not a practicing Catholic. So we would go maybe a couple times a year on the big holidays like Christmas, Easter, those kinds of things. And we mostly did that to please my grandmother. And I just remember walking into this massive church. I was like a little kid, and walking into this massive church, and I didn't really know anyone. There was, and there was hundreds of people, and I just had no idea what was going on, because, I went maybe once or twice a year. And we were sitting there, and then all of a sudden we were standing, and then we were sitting, and then we were standing, and then we were singing and praying, and I didn't know the words to any of the songs. I was just trying not to be noticed, mostly. I was trying not to be... I'm going to try to get through this without being distracted with my daughter here. Hi. And this definitely wouldn't have happened in that church. You want to stand up here with me? Okay, sounds good. But, so I just remember just not really knowing what was going on, and and it was so boring, and I, didn't really understand what we were singing or what we were praying. Might want to grab her. Sorry. This is one of the things that I love about the Grove that I'll get to in a little bit here. But I just remember feeling so out of place. And then when it was time to receive communion, I hadn't been baptized, I hadn't been raised in the church, so I wasn't allowed to go up. My mom didn't go to these kinds of things, so it was just me that was kind of left behind in the pew. And it just felt so awkward, and I was so kind of embarrassed, and I didn't really understand why I wasn't allowed to go up there with everyone else. And I didn't understand why I wasn't allowed to go up there with everyone else. And Cole, do you want to bring her out there? Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, Ivy. Oh geez, I was not expecting that. Okay, let me try to get my train of thought back. So communion, that just felt like a really big deal to me as a little kid, because I just didn't understand why I was being left behind, why I couldn't go up there with everyone else. And maybe it was a little dramatic to feel like I was, super left out and all that, but I just didn't really understand, and I would beg my dad to go up there with everyone else, and he tried to make me feel better. He was like, no, like, you don't want to go up there. The cracker doesn't even taste good. But it wasn't about the cracker. I didn't care about the cracker. It was that I didn't want to be left out, and I didn't understand why, in my mind, why I wasn't good enough to go up there with everyone else. So that was that. It's not like I was traumatized or anything like that, but it did leave a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. So other than when my niece was baptized, I never really went back to church again. And then in August 2020, I became a mom to that little girl out there. And it was amazing, and it was hard, and it was beautiful and exhausting and incredibly lonely at times. I had always been kind of trying to find like a community of people, but I think when I became a mom, it became really apparent that Cole and I just didn't have like that community surrounding us. We felt very lonely sometimes because we didn't have like parent friends, that we could bounce things off of. So, it just felt like there was something missing. And then the following year, we moved to Cottage Grove, and I started looking around for things to do with Ivy. And then preschool playtime started popping up on my Facebook. And so it took me a couple months to get up the courage to go. So I saw it was at a church, and my daughter's a little crazy, as you can see. So it took me a couple months to get up the courage to go, but we went, and we had a great time, and I was so impressed with everything that Chelsea had put together. And so we kept going. And then I started getting really curious about, what is this place that we're in? And so I started looking at the Grove website. And I just remember thinking that if I were to go to a church, it would be this one. And so I had a lot of questions, and I was really curious, and I thought, what would it be like to be a family that goes to church every Sunday? What would it be like to be a part of like a community of people? And I didn't know if there was something I was missing, because the only experience I had was the church that I went to growing up. So I pitched the idea to Cole, and he was like, okay, sure. So we went, and we thought, we'll go on Easter, because we figured we'll go unnoticed. There's going to be a bunch of people that are going to go, and if we don't like it, we never have to come back. No one's going to notice us. It'll be fine. The problem is that we were noticed. And, Ivy thought it would be a great idea to run up and down this aisle here and get onto the stage with Jeremy, as you saw. And, but we had a great time. I'm going to be honest, my expectations were pretty low coming the first time, just because I had expected to feel like I didn't know enough about God or the Bible to be here. I had expected to feel like there was that barrier of entry with me coming and just not knowing what was going on. But I didn't experience that at all. I mean, the words to the music were up on the screen. Pastor Jeremy, he explained things from the Bible in a way that did not assume that you had heard them before. And I really appreciated that. And I think the biggest thing was that how welcome Ivy was, and how there's so many accommodations for them here, and it's okay if they run up here and they totally interrupt you, and it happens, they're kids, and it happens sometimes. And that was just really appreciated by us, so we kept coming. And then a Facebook friend request came. I think it was Katie who sent me a friend request first, because we were still in the mindset of, well, we don't have to come back. Like, we can just keep kind of testing this out and seeing how it's going. But then I got that friend request, and then Jeremy sent one, and Chelsea sent one, and I was like, oh, okay, they remember us. But it was a good thing. Like, we were just kind of tickled that, they remembered us and, wanted to connect with us. So we kept coming. And then the biggest moment was when we got to receive communion for the first time. That was really special, because all three of us, me, Cole, Ivy, got to come up here and receive communion. And it didn't matter that me and Ivy hadn't been baptized. It didn't matter that I hadn't grown up in the church. It didn't matter that we hadn't been a part of the church for very long. We got to all come up here together, and no one was left behind. And I'm pretty sure I was like trying not to cry the whole time, because it was a big deal for us. And honestly, 2022 was a pretty dark year for our family. It was really hard. But there were some bright spots, and I think that finding the Grove was definitely a bright spot for us. And I don't have like my relationship with God all figured out. Like, I'm still learning, and it's really, really beautiful that we can come here and not have it all figured out. We can come here and we can learn, and that's okay, because it's a safe, non-judgmental space to do that. So I really appreciate that, and thank you for sticking with me through the distractions. Thank you.
Having to take this mask on enough anymore. Thank you, Alexa. And what a beautiful story. And I hope, again, that as you hear Alexa's story and all of these other stories over the course of this series, you are starting to think about your own heroic story of imperfect faith and how you might tell that to other people because they are really compelling. They're really powerful. So, have you been paying attention to the news at all this week? There's been some pretty big things that happened in the news. There's this like Chinese spy balloon. Two of them maybe? I don't know. And people with guns talking about going out and shooting a balloon that's 11 miles in the air. I don't know. There's this whole debt ceiling thing. Anybody paying attention to that? That's kind of a big deal. But the biggest news story, the one that maybe got the most amount of headlines, at least among the people that I'm connected with, you know what it was? Marie Kondo. Yeah, you familiar with this story? So Marie Kondo has fallen off the wagon. You might know Marie Kondo from one of her books or from one of her shows. Marie Kondo became really big several years ago. She is like the guru for organization, right? She gave all of the tips for organizing your home, organizing your life. And the expectation was that you should be able to do this and you will be better for doing this. If she can do it, you should be able to as well. Well, an interesting thing happened in the last couple of years. Marie Kondo had a third child. Okay. And apparently your experiences in life often change your perspective on things. And even for someone like Marie Kondo, her experience of having a third child has changed her perspective on things. So she came out with her most recent book in November, but it didn't get nearly as many headlines as this past week when she did an interview with the Washington Post where she talked about her book and her experience of having a third child. And here's the line that really got the most attention that you might have seen as well. This is a part of the Washington Post article. Kondo says that for many, the perfectly organized space is not realistic. Until now, I was a professional tidier, so I did my best to keep my home tidy at all times. I've kind of given up on that, in a good way for me. Now I realize what is important to me is enjoying spending time with my children at home. Wow, did this get a lot of attention. Now, there were several people, a lot of people who were angry because they're like, why didn't you get this about us before? We were telling you your expectations for us were unrealistic, and now you're coming around to it? And so there was a whole lot of derision in that type of way. However, there was a different response that might categorize what my response fell into, was complete joy. Because if someone who is as prominent and as put together and as clean as Marie Kondo can say, it's okay to be messy, for my life to be messy and for my home to be messy, then I can be messy too. And it gives me that permission to accept that messiness into my life, into my home. That's what this series has been all about, right? This beautiful series, this beautiful mess series where we have said, what if the cracks in our lives can actually be highlights? So we have been sharing stories from people in our congregation talking about their own messy experiences of faith, and we have been looking to the Bible and about these heroic stories of imperfect faith, specifically looking at the book of Hebrews. And there's this 11th chapter in the book of Hebrews that lays out all of these heroes that all of the people who were reading this letter would have known about. These are heroes of the faith. Everybody would have known these stories. And the author lays them out and saying, you think that they had it all put together. They really didn't. It's only their messy faith that was able to bring them through to the point of being celebrated as heroes. And this is a very brief reference to one of the heroes that we're going to talk about today. This is in Hebrews 11:21. By faith, Jacob, as he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped as he leaned on his staff. So Jacob is the son of Isaac, who we talked about 2 weeks ago. And Isaac is the son of Abraham, who we talked about 2 weeks before that. So we've got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this family that is full of heroes of the faith. All of these stories, at least the stories of these three heroes, appear in the book of Genesis, which is the first book that we have in our Bibles. My wife is a pediatric occupational therapist, so she works with a lot of kids. Kids are interesting. Kids have lots of interesting things to say, and she often comes home with some interesting stories of the things that these kids have had to say. And a couple weeks ago, she came home and said that one of the third graders that she works with came in and said, "I've been reading a book lately." She said, "Oh yeah, what book?" "The Bible. I've read the Bible." "I've read Genesis. I'm pretty sure that it's the first in the series." Genesis, the first in the series. And at first, we all laugh. I thought it was funny. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, actually, she's pretty spot on. Not only is Genesis, not Genesis, Genesis is not only the first book in the Bible, but like a first book in its series, it kind of creates the narrative universe for everything that follows after it. It establishes the characters and the world that we live in, the rules and how things are governed, and it also foreshadows a lot of the things that come after it. And so as we read these stories in the book of Genesis, as we talk about these stories on Sundays, and as we talk about this story today, I want you to think about it in those terms. A first in the series type of story that is foreshadowing something that's going to come after it. So we have Abraham, we have Isaac, and today we get to turn our attention to Jacob. Just a little bit of background on Jacob. So Jacob was born as the son of Isaac, but he was one of a set of twins. His brother Esau was born first, and then Jacob was born right after him, and he gets the name Jacob because Jacob literally means heel grabber. On his way out, he's grabbing his brother's heel. And this becomes a foreshadowing of the things yet to come, because Jacob gets known for being a grabber of things. Eventually, as they get older, as their father is about to die, he is about to hand down his blessing that is meant for Esau. Jacob decides that he's going to grab after that blessing on his own. He's going to trick his father into giving him the blessing instead. He succeeds in that, and you can imagine that his older brother's not very happy about it. So Jacob heads for the hills. He's running away from all of his problems. He's running away from everything that he might be chasing behind him. And that's where we pick up the story in Genesis 28. And it's going to be up here on the screen behind me. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He reached a certain place where he decided to camp because the sun had gone down. He took one of the stones and placed it near his head. Then he fell asleep in that place and had a dream. He saw a stairway erected on the earth with its top reaching to the heavens. The angels were going up and coming down it, and the Lord stood at its top. He said, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the ground you are lying on. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west, east, north, and south. All the families of the earth will pronounce blessings on one another using your name and that of your descendants. I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you." Then Jacob woke up and thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place," but I did not realize it. He was afraid and said, "What an awesome place this is. This is nothing else than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Early in the morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed near his head and set it up as a sacred stone. Then he poured oil on top of it. He called this place Bethel, although the former name of the town was Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God is with me and protects me on this journey I am taking, and gives me food to eat and clothing to wear, and I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will become my God. Then this stone I have set up as a sacred stone will be the house of God, and I will surely give you back a tenth of everything you give me. Before we go any further, just want to acknowledge, yes, this is where Led Zeppelin gets the idea for Stairway to Heaven, one of the best rock and roll songs ever recorded. This is where the idea comes from. Yeah, Rich is back there nodding his head. But with that out of the way, let's turn to the story. It's a longer story than we have been reading recently. So I just want to pull out a few interesting details that even as you dig into some of it, don't necessarily stand out. The first thing, this idea of a stone. So at first reading, it talks about Jacob going to bed and he takes out this stone. The easy thing is to say, well, he uses this stone and he's going to use it as a pillow, right? To put under his head. It's olden times, thousands of years ago, he's got to have a place to put his head. This is going to be his pillow. The story does not say that he puts it under his head. It says he puts it near his head. We don't actually know what that means. However, there are scholars who suggest that he was not using it as a pillow because it's not under his head, it's near his head. And the idea is that Jacob was probably actually picking up on this cultural thing where this stone was supposed to be a sacred stone or a magical stone. And so as he goes to bed, he puts it near his head as like a piece of magic, a piece of protection for him while he's going to be sleeping. Had no functional reason. This is the guy who's been handed down this faith from his father and from his grandfather. And yet, although he's been handed down this very specific faith, this very specific connection to this very specific God, he's still not really sold on it. He still doesn't really get it. He still doesn't necessarily believe in it. He's going to trust this sacred magic stone more than this faith that has been handed down to him. That's really interesting. Well, then he falls asleep. And while he's sleeping, he has this dream, and God appears to him in this dream. And the interesting thing that gets pointed out is that God does not say, I'm here now. Jacob has finally slowed down. Jacob has finally stopped running. And now that he is at the point of having slowed down and stopped running, now that he is forcing himself to pay attention, he realizes that God has been there all along. And there are no conditions around it either. There is no, well, now that you've stopped, I will show up. Now that you do this thing, I will respond. As we read the text, hi, Ivy. Now, as you read it, there are no conditions around God being with him. He says, I am with you. I will protect you. I am here. Regardless of where things go from here, regardless of how you feel about me. And now, having slowed down, having paid attention, having recognized that, Jacob makes this realization as he wakes up. Oh, God was here all along, and I just didn't realize it. Light bulb on, right? So we have this idea when there's this big God moment in life that now everything is going to be different. Everything's going to change from here. Jacob's story is going to be completely revolutionized. He may have had cracks in his story before, but now this is where the polish goes on. Everything's going to be great, right? Well, not so much, because what happens? Not everything's got to be polished, right? So now not everything it actually is polished. Cracks continue to show up. Jacob immediately, right after this thing happens, right after he has this realization, he starts putting conditions up where God had left none. Look at Jacob's response again. If God is with me and protects me on this journey I am taking and gives me food to eat and clothing to wear, and I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will become my God. Then this stone that I have set up as a sacred stone will be the house of God. And I will surely give back a tenth of everything you give me. Jacob, after having all of this, everything that has been handed down from his grandfather through his father, everything that has just happened to him, he's still not completely sold on it, and he's putting up conditions where there has been no conditions given to him. As a first in the series type of story, this is foreshadowing lots of what is to come. It's foreshadowing the rest of Jacob's story. In just a couple, in a couple chapters, there's this story of Jacob again having this weird interaction with God where he actually gets into a wrestling match with God, and he ends up hurting his hip as a part of it, and he gets his name changed as a part of it. He's no longer supposed to be known as Jacob, heel grabber, even though he's continuing to grab after control of his entire life. He is now given the name Israel. And Israel means God fighter. So this is foreshadowing what's to come for Jacob's story. It's also foreshadowing the whole story of the nation of Israel. They are going to continue to fight with God. They have been handed down this blessing that they're going to go out and bless the world, and yet they continue to have the exact same struggles as Jacob has. And it also sets up some foreshadowing for our own stories as well. Have you ever struggled to hang on to something that's been handed down to you? Have you ever run from your problems? Have you ever struggled to trust? Have you ever gotten into a fight with God? Do you get into a fight with God? Do you ever add conditions where there were no conditions? Jacob's story is not only, this story of Jacob is not only a story for Jacob, it is not only a story for the people of Israel, but it is a story for us as well. Here's the good news. It is good news because there are no conditions. Because if and when we slow down and pay attention and remove those conditions, we can realize that God is there for us even when we aren't paying attention, even when we don't fully believe it. And the other piece of good news is that we are in good company too. The heroes of the faith were in that exact same condition. They weren't always fully sold on it. They had all sorts of doubts, all sorts of misgivings, all sorts of struggles, all sorts of fights with God, all sorts of conditions that they put on themselves, and yet they were celebrated as heroes. If someone like Jacob can get away with being a mess, if someone like Marie Kondo can get away with being a mess, then we can too. That's the good news. That is my prayer for us, that even and especially when things get messy, even and especially when we are uncertain, even and especially when we try to put conditions on things that are unconditional, that we can know that God is with us, God is walking alongside of us, that the messiness is just a part of it. So may that be so for us. We now get to move into a time that is known as communion. Some people know it as the Lord's Supper. Other people call it the Eucharist. In his final moments with his closest followers, Jesus gathered for a meal with them. It was just hours away from him being turned over to the authorities, hours away from him being arrested, and beaten and executed. And in those final moments, he retold this story from their shared history, this story of God showing up, God being present with God's people. And as Jesus retold this old story, he did so in such a way that incorporated, that was a foreshadowing of the things yet to come. These things that had happened hundreds of years ago were now a foreshadowing of what was going to happen in the hours and the days and the years to follow. So as they were sharing in this meal, he took this cup. He took first this bread, and he broke it and said, "Imagine this bread as my body, which is broken for you. Whenever you have this meal, do this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, after the meal, he took this cup and he said, "Imagine this is my blood, which is poured out for you for the forgiveness of sins. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and you drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again." It would have been easy for him to look over that circle of 12 people and say, "You don't have it all together. You're about to betray me. You're about to deny that you even know me. You don't agree with me on all of these things that I believe." And to start closing off that table and extending the invitation to only a handful. Actually, by the end of it, he would have just extended the invitation to himself and eaten in front of them. That did not happen. The table was open to everyone. And so in the same way as we move into this time, this table is open to everyone. You do not have to have it all put together. You do not have to have all of your beliefs figured out. You do not have to be an adult. The best way to experience the grace of God is to experience it. And so in just a few moments, I'm going to invite you to come up here. We'll have a person placed on each aisle. Because these remain COVID times, we're continuing to do single servings. So you'll come up, the servers will say a quick blessing over you and then hand you one of these. You can take them back to your seats to partake. There's 2 layers on here. The first layer you'll remove, and there's a wafer in here. It is a gluten-free wafer. So if you are gluten-free, you are welcome to participate. You can then remove the second layer. The second layer leads you to the grape juice. It is not wine, so if you are in recovery, you are welcome to participate. And then you're going to have an empty cup. You're welcome to hang on to it until after the service, or then go to the back where there is a garbage can there as well. Again, everyone is welcome at this table. As we move forward into this time together, one thing that we often say, because it's important to say even and especially when we're not so certain about it, to have you repeat after me. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ is coming again. Amen. Please come and partake.
I will build my house where the storm won't drown, on the rock that does not move. I will set my hope in your love, O Lord, and your faithfulness will prove you are steadfast by the word you spoke. All the starry hosts are called out by name each night. In your watchful care, I will rest secure as you lead us with your light. You are steadfast, steadfast stand fast in the moment of emptiness. All was fulfilled. In the hour of darkness, your light was revealed. In the presence of death, your life was affirmed. In the absence of holiness, you are still God. 'Cause you are steadfast. Steadfast, you are steadfast. Steadfast, you are steadfast. 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 Steadfast.
Once again, it's so good to be with you this morning. Friday is the pajama ball. Woohoo! How many of you are volunteering for the pajama ball? How many of you have costumes picked out? Yeah, so once again, the pajama ball is happening this Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Rachel, are we still accepting volunteers? Oh, yes, we are. If you are interested in volunteering in some capacity behind the scenes or right out in the middle of the dance floor, Rachel, you want to raise your hand? Come and connect with Rachel immediately after the service so we can get you all the information that you need in order to do that. You are welcome to come as a participant or invite other people to come as well. One thing that we're going to ask of some able-bodied people who are willing is, I've mentioned in the past couple weeks that we're going to be clearing out this space to be a dance floor. You may have noticed there's painter's tape on the floor. After the service, what we need is a few volunteers or more than a few volunteers to help to move the pews to the side so that we're able to do what needs to be done during the week to get this space ready. So if you are able and willing to help with that, we would greatly appreciate that help. Some of you may have noticed that I came up here wearing a boot today. I have a stress fracture in my foot because I can't do anything slow or steady, and I constantly have to push it. And apparently you're not like supposed to hack the manufacturer settings on treadmills in order to run further than you're supposed to on multiple days in a row. Imagine that. It just seems like a really good analogy. There's a crack in my foot right now, and in order to do something about it, I need to slow down. So with that in mind, I'll have you stand up as you are able and extend your hands to receive the blessing. As we go out into this chaotic world, into this chaotic day that's full of uncertainty, confusion, cracks even, may we take this as an opportunity to slow down, to pay attention to the ways in which God is at work in our lives and in our world without condition. May that be so.